Being compliant is just straightforward. Being maliciously compliant? Well, that's another story. Welcome to this episode of Malicious Compliance. Our first one is from Kid and More. About 5 or 6 years ago, I built a fence in my backyard. I talked to my neighbors and we decided on a good place to build the fence. We knew an approximate property line based on some survey pins, but were both too cheap to pay for a surveyor. We shook hands and I built the fence. It was a great deal for my neighbors. I paid for everything, built the fence, and all they had to do was give me a thumbs up when it was done. Then, a year later, they sold their house. That meant I got a new neighbor. More specifically, I got Anne. Anne was from the big city. Anne was a realtor. Anne had flipped 8 houses in 12 years. Anne loved this new house and planned on staying for a long time. And Anne had a dog. Razzie was a German Shepherd mix that spent most of the day outside while Anne went to work. Razzie was also aggressive towards children, animals, insects, and any plants that waved in the breeze. Razzie also, as Anne once told me, loved to chew on furniture. That's why Razzie stayed outside so much. About 6 months after Anne moved in, I saw a surveyor walking around in my neighborhood and he was paying special attention to my backyard. The next day, Anne showed up at my front door with a stack of papers and asked me if I was going to pay her for the 9 inches that my fence was encroaching on her property. I explained the handshake deal with the last neighbors, but she was having no part of it. She wanted the fence moved or she wanted money. No discussions. She had spoken to her lawyer friend and was perfectly happy to take me to court over the fence. She told me, "I don't know how you guys do it out here in the sticks, but where I come from, we follow the rules." So I got rid of the fence. The next day, I unscrewed the horizontal rails from the brackets, stacked the fence panels up against my garage, and pulled up the fence posts with my work van. About a week later, Anne shows up at my front door again. She wants to know when I'm going to be building a new fence. Turns out, without my portion of the fence, she has not been able to let Razzie out unattended for fear that he will run away, attack something, or get hit by a car. She has also told me that she can't keep him in the house all day while she's at work anymore. Her furniture and carpet are all but ruined. I told her, "Well, Anne, I'm not going to be rebuilding the fence. I don't want any legal trouble, and the best way to stay out of trouble is to not build near your property." The look on her face was priceless. I thought she was going to cry. She probably did when she got back home. She tried to protest, saying that she really needed the fence back, and she would even help pay for the new one. She told me how much she loved the style and aesthetic of the old one. It was just the location she had a problem with. I stood firm. There would be no new fence. She never got a fence. She made her half-hearted attempts to put up some bamboo fencing, but Razzie tore through that stuff like a wet newspaper. Eventually, I sold my place and moved away. I took the old fence panels with me and still look at them every day when I let my dog out in the morning. You gotta love how Anne came in all high and mighty, claiming that she doesn't know how people do things in the sticks, but then ended up finding out real fucking quick. That's what happens when you're an insufferable human being. This next one is by Crazy Gay for Hire. I, 35 male, used to work at a hardware store that rhymes with blows. About 10 years ago, I was a sales associate out on the floor. One day, I decided to get my industrials pierced because, as I knew the policy, I noticed the front end and a few managers had piercings that did not fit with the policy, so I thought it was a bit lax. After I got the piercings, I got wrote up for not following policy. So I researched the policy and purchased a blows beanie so I could meet all dress codes while covering them up. I still got wrote up and started disputing with HR about it because they were covered, and I was following policy even though they were ignoring policy on the front end and allowing them to have face piercings. After a few weeks of fighting, it ended up going to HR outside of the store. District HR calls me in for a meeting with a few store managers and the local HR. HR and managers inform me that even though they are all covered, Below still has a no piercings above a certain amount, location, and size policy, even though they can't see them, and I need to get rid of them because they say it's a safety hazard. In comes my compliance questions. I ask how they know I'm wearing and breaking policy if they cannot see them. They say they have the right to ask me to take off my beanie if they think I have them in, and they notice them in my ears when I'm walking into my shift. I repeat with a slightly different question. So does that mean you're going to make me whip out my dick every shift to make sure I don't have my cock piercing in? Are you going to make everyone take off shirts to verify no one is wearing nipple piercings? HR started backtracking real fast. I actually don't have a cock piercing or nipple piercings, but they didn't know that. After questioning the policy and arguing, they couldn't enforce what they couldn't see without sexually harassing people to fit their policy. HR ended up dropping all write-ups, and 2 weeks later, Blows changed the piercing policy to allow more piercing options and dyed hair. I like to think I helped with that policy change. I definitely think managers play favorites, and any manager that claims they don't, they're full of fucking shit, because managers will always have their favorites. It's just like teachers in school. Teachers had their favorite students, they had their least favorite students, and the favorite students usually got preferential treatment. And our final one is from Petite Peach Pep. This happened last year. I, female 31, was 1 week away from my due date and was working full-time in a school administration position. At this time, I had the capability to work from home if needed. Example, too sick to come into work, catch up on extra work, unable to secure daycare for my child, etc. When I accepted the position, prior to my pregnancy, I was told by my boss, let's call her Ronnie, that it was very flexible, as long as I got my hours in. I very rarely worked from home, and typically only did so for an hour or two in the morning, if it was needed later on in order to work before OBGYN appointments, as it was a long commute between work and home and the doctor's office. However, I was told by Ronnie after accepting the position to try to limit work from home to 2 days a month, which, fine. At this point, I was well under, since I was only working an hour or two, maybe twice a month, and only once a month before that. Being so close to my due date, I was experiencing physical hardships that made working on site more and more difficult, such as dizzy spells, a pulled tendon in my foot, and severe back pain. I was also scared of potentially going into labor while at work, with it being so far away from the hospital my OBGYN delivers that. To top it all off, my coworkers started asking more invasive questions about my pregnancy that made me uncomfortable. All in all, it was not a fun time. I explained all of this in an email to Ronnie and asked for her permission to almost exclusively work from home up until I go into labor. I said I thought it would be a reasonable accommodation and I work really well from home. Ronnie responded a couple days later denying my request to work from home at all and said I needed to be there since we would be starting some of our busiest work in a couple months, which I would be gone for on maternity leave anyways, so I'm not sure why she brought it up. But I could talk to HR about leave options if I am truly having trouble working. By the way, it is illegal in my state to require an employee to take leave if there is a reasonable accommodation that can be made instead. Cue malicious compliance. I immediately went to HR and did just that. We talked about options and found out I could start my leave the very next day and still be paid state mandatory leave pay for the extra time. I informed Ronnie that I would be out starting the next day as I needed to take care of myself. She said, "I understand you need to do what's best for you, but you need to understand that I need to do what's best for the team." So yeah, everything I normally managed basically went to crap in my absence as the other people on the team weren't qualified to do the work and kept taking time off leading up to my due date instead of learning the basics while I was still there to teach them. I left detailed procedure notes and workflow lists, but I later found out Ronnie had to pick up all the extra work and a lot of it never got done since she didn't have time. But it was the best thing for the team, right boss? I've said it before, I'll say it again. So many people are in positions they don't belong in, and clearly this boss, Ronnie, had zero foresight to see the clusterfuck of an avalanche that would happen doing things her way. But it was the best for the team in her mind. I'm glad the OP got the time off they deserved. Alright, that's enough maliciousness for the day. Well, that wraps up this episode of Malicious Compliance. If you liked the video, please drop a like, share my content on all of your social media, subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure to hit that bell so you're notified every time I upload, and drop a comment down below. It really helps with the algorithm and helps new people find my channel. Thanks for watching, thanks to my patrons and super thanks contributors. Have a great day and stay safe out there.